Hello, everyone. I'm Heather Clancy, Editor-at-Large with Trellis, formerly known as GreenBiz. Welcome to the latest Climate Pioneers episode. I am thrilled to welcome to my little home studio, Vice President of Sustainability for Whole Foods Market, Caitlin Leibert. Caitlin, hi, how are you today?
Hi, Heather. I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
Really appreciate it. For those of you in the audience who have not been on a Climate Pioneers episode before or interview, this is basically, I get to, you're eavesdropping. This is me reporting on a story, and I'm very glad to welcome you here. And in that vein, you're welcome to submit some questions, and I'll get to those probably around 25 to 30 minutes after the hour. I'm going to spend some time with Caitlin first, but if you do have questions, I welcome them and I'll work them into the chat. And we're probably going to end around 45 minutes after the hour, just so you have some time to get back to your work. I call the first section of this interview the Getting to Know You section. Caitlin, I mentioned her title before. She was previously with Chipotle. And I'm just curious, like one thing I want to know right away is just what inspired you to make that switch. That's two great companies. What got you over to Whole Foods?
Yeah, two incredible companies. And I adored my time at Chipotle. I was there almost 15 years, oversaw sustainability for over a decade there. I was very happy in that role. I also know that if my life's purpose is to drive positive change in the food system, there is really no more important lever than retail to do that. It's what my research tells me. It's what we know. And when it comes to retailers, Whole Foods Market is really punches above its weight in terms of influence. It's incredibly influential and has a legacy of driving change. And when they came calling, I knew I had to listen. And I was not expecting it. And it was one of those life moments where I had to take a leap of faith and move to a new state and really dive in. I just knew it was the right role for me. And I'm eternally grateful for both of those experiences and both of those companies.
I want to dig into that comment about retail a little bit more. Why do you feel that way?
Well, we know that 80+% of Americans get their food from grocery stores. We also know that assortment is meaning what's on the shelves at grocery stores really drives what people eat, therefore, right? So if the vast majority of people, of Americans, are getting their food at grocery stores, retailers hold a very powerful role, right? It's like the gateway between how we eat as Americans, what we eat. And they're the ones driving the purchasing decisions, right? So what retailers say in terms of spec and scope and scale, these things matter, and they're what drive change. So that's why Whole Foods' legacy of not just what's on the shelf, but particularly what's banned from being on our shelves. And we'll talk a little bit more about the pollinator policy, et cetera. That's why retail, for me, is the key lever in the food system.
Got it. So Whole Foods, I would imagine, has a pretty big pipeline of job candidates. It's a pretty intriguing company. I'm curious what you ask every job candidate that's trying to be on your team.
Yeah, I love this question. I'll go with two that I always ask. The first is, what is your superpower? When I look at a role, I'm also looking at the dynamic of a team, right? So at any given point, I think there's a way to think of hiring as one-dimensional, which is like, does this candidate have the requirements of the job? And of course, that is essential. That's like the ticket to entry. But then you're also looking at things like team dynamics, and you're looking at things like, hey, what type of leader do we need for this specific work? So for me, I like to ask candidates right away, like, what is your superpower? Like I think it's really essential that you know yourself in general, but certainly when it comes to this work. So what do you really shine at? Help me understand that. And ideally, the candidate has a really crisp, clear answer on that. And that's really helpful for me. And then the other thing that is maybe a little bizarre, but that is, what is your relationship with the word no? And we'll talk about this, I'm sure, a little bit more. But corporate sustainability is not for the faint of heart. Um, you will, you're as a practitioner in corporate sustainability, you know deeply the science, you know the
Yeah.
poly crisis we're in, you know that we need to drive change. And again, business is a key lever to do that. And yet, driving change is really hard in systems and in business. Driving sustainable change is even harder. So I like to make sure that the people I work with aren't the type of people that get discouraged when they hear no, they get curious. And so if you're easily discouraged, certainly this type of work, but on my team especially, is not probably the best fit.
Okay, now I have to ask you those questions. What's your superpower?
Oh yeah. So I think for me, I think uh, motivating and influential leadership are really my superpower, right? So
Hmm.
as a sustainability leader, I will not likely be in a position to make all the rules 100% the most sustainable. So therefore, my job is how do I engage? How does my team engage 100 plus thousand team members, employees, to care and dive in. And that's everything from the CEO to your cashier at your local Whole Foods market, right? How do you get them to understand and dive in? So for me, and then I would say also infectious enthusiasm is something I am also known for.
And that means that you respond to no with infectious enthusiasm and you don't take it.
I think this work, we are all in service, right? And that's the reality of it.
Hmm.
This is a very low ego industry where it ought to be. We are in service, if nothing else, to Mother Nature, to the climate. We have, I like to tell my team, the ultimate stakeholder in planet Earth, Mother Nature. And I say that partially as a joke, but partially very true, right? And so knowing that we are in service, how do we get curious about getting things across the finish line? How do we get nimble about it? So yeah, when I hear the word no, my first question is, what can I do to better understand, to make it a yes? Maybe not today, but in the future.
Well, I know what motivates you because I will disclose to the audience that Caitlin had a 103-degree fever last night and she is here. Her job clearly motivates her. She's passionate about what she does. What do you do to motivate your team? What's your most successful tactic?
Yeah. Um, and thank you for disclosing
And now
that.
you
It's
can
what
cough and feel comfortable coughing.
Yes, if you see the tissues and the coughs and also the sheen of sweat. No, I'm so thrilled to be here. But I will say, I think authenticity. Like, so when I talk about a successful strategy for motivating the team, like people know when you're selling them something. People know when you aren't acknowledging a glaring truth. This work is complex. It's juicy. It's hard. And I think authenticity is at the core of motivating a team. A team cannot be motivated if they don't feel seen or heard. I have very much a human first policy. Like, we are all humans doing our best. The expectation is excellence. There's no doubt when we talk about the pressure and the stakeholders we have, like, yes, we must be excellent. But with that, I also see you as a human and want to understand. So truly, I think motivating for the team, authenticity, always listening, human first policy. And I think what that all leads to is this feeling of truly being in it together because we are, right?
Two more quick questions for you though before we really get to the meat of this. Who can you count on for a reality check?
I love this question. Who can't I? I mean, I surround myself with people who keep it real. If you can't tell, like, authenticity is a major theme in my life.
Yeah.
It's super important. So I need not look too far. And I think it depends on the situation. Certainly, and generally speaking, my partner Liz is keeps it very real with me. My core group of friends, but also my team. Um, again, I'm obsessed with my team. I think they're so great. And really, no one is practicing like performative leadership on this team. So they definitely let me know when we're approaching the boundary of any given situation. But certainly that's how I live my life. Like I love a challenge. I want us to get in there, but with that, like you really need to have a lot of gut checks. Like, how are we doing? How are we feeling? How can I support? Am I thinking of this the right way is often what I'll ask some of the subject matter experts on my team. Like, hey, here's my gut. Am I thinking about this the right way? So I can count on a lot of people for for that reality check.
Okay, and confession time. What's been your biggest mistake and what did you learn from it?
Um, Interesting question. And it's tough because I'm one of those really annoying people that believes in like the path, right? And so adversity is such a key piece of that. So when things come up or happen to you or your trip or you fall, like I see that as really a course correction more than a mistake. But goodness knows I'm not perfect. So that doesn't, I'm not trying to dodge responsibility. So if I really think about sort of the constellation of mistakes I made earlier in my career, I think it was probably around putting way too much self-worth in my job performance. Like I think really understanding that, I think loyalty and hard work, that's, as a Midwest girl, it's always come easily for me. And they're super beautiful things, but they really need to be balanced with a gut check that the reality is you are 100% replaceable. And that was hard for me to understand, I think, earlier in my career. So I think it's important that for me, I learned about making sure that you're giving to those who respect and treat you with dignity. And the same goes for companies and corporations. And that's why my career has been with companies and brands that is at their core. I would have a very hard time for doing this work and giving so much where that wasn't at the core.
Yeah. So those who know Whole Foods Market, and that hopefully is all of you, and those of you who don't will know more. I think organic. I think that's the word that pops into my brain and my friend's brain when I would mention the company. Your team talks about climate smart agriculture. So give me a definition of that. What does that mean?
Sure. So when we talk about climate smart agriculture at Whole Foods Market, we're talking about the climate supportive methods of agriculture, such as regenerative, organic, biodynamic. Some of our certifying partners for Source for Good, such as Fairtrade USA and Rainforest Alliance. And this is a collection or the methods that are climate supportive agriculture. So when we say climate smart ag, that's what we're talking about. It's the group of certified methods of agriculture that are supportive of climate and nature.
Mm-hmm. And your company has been doing this for a long time. I'm curious, like what's evolved. Everyone talks about regenerative agriculture now. So, and climate smart actually has become a term that I've heard more and more. Like, what changes did Whole Foods Market have to make from a systems standpoint to evolve into the place we are now? Like, has there been much that's changed? I mean, or,
Yeah. It's interesting. It's such an important question. Whole Foods Market really has this ethos of legacy around this work. And in particular, we have a decades-long investment in climate smart ag, mainly through originally organic, right? And so we have invested heavily in organic. But we also know that it's going to take all the tools in the toolkit, right, to move us along the spectrum of, really extractive agriculture to climate supportive or regenerative, right? And so I think the evolution is acknowledging beyond one form of agriculture. This is the group of agriculture that is, as a retailer, we have the opportunity to support and continue to evolve. Again, it's a spectrum. It's not a binary, meaning like there are practices along agriculture from the most extractive to the most regenerative. As a retailer, we play a role in saying, hey, this group of climate smart agriculture practices are better. Therefore, this is what we really are working towards investing in heavily. So you brought up regenerative. We've been tracking regenerative agriculture, as you can imagine, for many years. And I think what's really important about this is that it's really a partnership with our farmers and ranchers and suppliers about their practices, visiting their farms to learn from them and other experts. And that's really what based the regenerative claims policy that we brought to life in 2021. So it's from those conversations and like being on farm, talking with the experts that we started to really bring the conversation around a policy to vet regenerative claims on the products that we sell in store. So at Whole Foods, we define regenerative agriculture as holistic farming and grazing practices that improve soil, enhance biodiversity, and increase carbon capture. It's also important when you talk about the evolution to note that we are not saying there is one better form of agriculture, right? This is the group, climate smart ag or climate supportive ag, that is important to move towards to ensure that climate is being supported by agriculture, right? So we haven't really talked about the size of the prize, but ag accounts for roughly a third of all greenhouse gas emissions. So we know that climate and agriculture are deeply interconnected. We believe that through things such as climate smart agriculture and some of the other things we'll get into today, agriculture can very much be part of the solution.
Yeah, so I have about 3 paths I can follow off of that answer. I'm going to go first back to something you said originally, which is the sort of the role of the retailer, right? So can you give me a sense of how you market some of these products? Are you calling things regenerative? How many organic versus regenerative do you have? Like, do you really call these things out in the stores? Like, how is this merchandised?
It's again, what a complex question, right? So I think the teams that my team, our sustainability team, my sister team, the quality standards team, our role within Whole Foods Market is really about the policy, standards, and integrity of this work. We have brilliant minds across the company that work in marketing and merchandising, and together that really helps support and create and answer the question that you have. So I think what's really unique about Whole Foods is nearly 33%, so a third of all products that we sell are organic. That's like near, 57% of fresh produce was organic, 30+% of meat, right? So we're talking about like 41,000 plus organic products in the store and 154 products with certified regenerative agriculture, regenerative agriculture certified in our stores. So we're talking about a massive number. I think it's really important with that integrity plays a role in it. So I think our role as a retailer is setting policy that ensures that when something says organic or when something says regenerative, that means something. It means something specific, that it's certified by an approved third party, and that we know customers come to Whole Foods for many reasons, but one of the largest ones is the trust that they have in us as a retailer. And so I think how we market these things matters. I think historically, we've been on the more conservative side of marketing some of these things because it was just the way that we did business. And then I think some of the industry caught up, right? I shouldn't say
absolutely.
caught up all the way, but they've evolved, right? And so now I think we have an opportunity to be a little bit, we should sharpen the pencil a little bit more. And it's something we're talking about, how we talk about this incredible influence. Like, I don't think people understand the true commitment and integrity and impact that we have, that simply by shopping at Whole Foods, you're really helping to support things such as the climate and nature, which is pretty cool.
So you were talking about that mix before. Is that true across all 50? Yeah, I think it's 530-ish stores, something like that. So is each store empowered to make different selection decisions, or is that, how do the mixes vary across the regions?
Yeah, I think we have a really robust local program. So one of the
Hmm.
magical things is feeling like you're a forager in our stores, right? You go in, you discover some of these incredible local brands. We have an incredible program called our LEAP program that is for up and coming um, food entrepreneurs and their products, which is really exciting. We have some incredible success stories coming out of that, things like Siete and Poppy and all of these incredible brands that were once found by one forager in one or a handful of stores, right? So certainly that is alive and well in our store. But we have to balance that across having a consistent experience when you walk into our stores. So it's a little bit of both. Certainly, um, we will never be short of like cool up and coming products, right? And so part of that is the pipeline from each of, things that are hyper local or hyper regional will always have a place in our stores.
So how do you consider nature and biodiversity in
Mm,
your sourcing decisions? Like we're talking about organic, but the buzz now, pun intended, is biodiversity. Like we
mm.
know that many practices, the monoculture that this world has been promoting, is really bad for the various species that we're trying to protect. So how do you consider that in the sourcing decisions? How do you work with that team to help them think about that?
I think what's most important when it comes to our strategy around biodiversity is highlighting the interconnectedness of it, right? So I think when you think of biodiversity in a vacuum, that's maybe not the most effective approach, right? So nature is such an interconnected thing. It's part of what is so magical about it, right? And so to kind of peel out individual metrics can feel a little bit crass, it can feel challenging usually. So I think what's most important about our biodiversity work is that it's really rooted in our overarching climate and nature strategy. So things like carbon abatement, biodiversity, water health, they're all a component of our overarching climate and nature strategy. And that's important for a couple of reasons. One is because these things aren't improved in a vacuum. So some of the things that we talked about today, like the different forms of climate smart agriculture, are not just helping to sequester carbon, but also helping to improve soil health and enhance pollinator health, air quality, et cetera. So these are interconnected things. And each of the ecosystem services has value, right? So to think of it as separate is not necessarily the most strategic approach. So that's the first thing. Let's find the initiatives that really raise the bar on multiple components of climate and nature, biodiversity, water, carbon, soil health, et cetera. There's so many different components to that. But the second piece that I think is really important is it's really easy as a merchant, I think, to be inundated by all the special requests across the company, right? So our job as a sustainability team is to deliver a really clear message to our merchants that we have a strategy around climate and nature, and here are the levers that you can pull ranked, right? Here's what we're focused on next year. Here's what we're focused on to achieve our goals, et cetera. I think it can get really overwhelming if we're not doing that work for our merchants and just saying like, hey, this is important, that's important, focus on this. Also, did you know about water? These things can get really complex. And so our job as sustainability practitioners is to deliver a really clear, concise message that's rooted in that interconnected strategy.
Got it. Speaking of next year, you do have a policy that I want to ask you about
Mm,
specifically. By 2025, your plan is to require growers to have integrated pest management strategy. I'm going to ask you to define that in a moment. Basically, protecting bees and pollinators. So you've got
mm,
this strategy you announced last December to really protect the creatures that help our food grow.
yeah.
Why are these policies necessary? I'm just curious, like, okay, why you're
Mm.
a long time organic, like isn't this like just naturally assumed? I mean, why is it, do we need a
Yeah.
separate strategy and policy?
Yeah, I think with this group, I don't need to elaborate on the fact that pollinators are an essential part of our food system. A stat that I frequently use is about 35% of the world's food crop depends on animal pollinators to reproduce. So think of that as like 1 in every 3 bites of food you eat. So pollinators are essential. And as we talked about before, retail also plays a key role in driving change in the food system. So, retail as a massive lever of change, um, policies that we make as a retail matter. So, at Whole Foods, we believe food can and should be a force for good and positive change in our communities and environment. And because of that, you really have to sort of codify that in a policy to drive change, right? It's not enough to say we care. That's important. That's step one. But in order to drive meaningful change, we really have to think about policy. And so that's why we introduced a new pollinator health policy, which you mentioned December of last year, which is aimed at reducing toxic pesticides in our produce supply chain. And specifically, we're going to be requiring fresh produce suppliers to adopt an integrated pest management practice by 2025.
What does that
Uh,
mean?
yeah, so this is a technical term that most farmers will understand, but an IPM or integrated pest management practices includes not using things such as neonicotinoids, right, to harm pollinators. So it's a series of pest management practices that manage pests while not harming pollinators, et cetera. So we're really excited. Like, we're partnering with suppliers like Rainier Fruit to promote pollinator-friendly practices, including dedicated pollinator habitats and Be Better certified orchards. And so this, again, it's like I think what's really important about this policy is that, similar to what I talked about with regenerative, it starts with talking to our farmers. It starts with talking with our suppliers and better understanding the incredible work that they're already doing. Like, we could not have made this policy as quickly as we did if the gap was so large, right? And so we've been talking for years with our key suppliers about the value of this. Our suppliers and farmers are right there with us. Like, these people really understand. And so overwhelmingly, it's been positively received. Certainly, as I mentioned, our suppliers are psyched that we're taking the lead on this. They're psyched that they get to share some of their practices and be, recognized as leaders in this space. But also, customers were very vocal about how cool this was. And one of my favorite things is team members were also super, super proud of this policy. So I spend not as much time as I wish I could in stores, but quite a bit in stores. I try and get in the store at least, once a month. In fact, I'm going to Wisconsin next week to spend almost a full week in the store with my partner, store team leader. So I'm very excited about that. But the team member response has been so fabulous to this, which is really, again, so important when we think about making this. That's 100,000 people who stand by the work that we do day in, day out, which is really cool.
To go back to, I wanted to explore the two things in a little more detail. One is, what resources have you given to the growers to help with this? Like, so what tools, what resources, what money, like, did you have to invest in this? Can you give us some examples of how you are helping them?
Yeah, I think like Rainier is a really good example of that. So again, there are technical tools. So as Whole Foods Market, we certainly provide technical tools as needed, right? We have a long history of investing within our supply system. But what's really cool about this one in particular is the shared mentality, right? So again, our role as a retailer is that we have 500,000 SKUs on our shelves, right? So if we think about that, all the different suppliers that bring that to life. And that makes us a terrible pun, but a hive mind, right? Of knowledge that we can share as well. So the first and most important thing that we did, as I talked about, is we talk with them first, right? Like I think really challenging when it comes to policy is policy that comes as a surprise to our suppliers, right? So we do our best to get out there. And when I mean get out there, I mean like on the land, talking with farmers, not just on conference calls, talking with academics and industry experts and really understanding, hey, is this the right policy? And then making sure our policy is really clear is another super important thing that we can do with our suppliers. Notifying them first, right? Explaining the roadmap, helping them understand their roles and responsibilities in a very clear way along with that timeline. So I think for me, those are the most important things.
And you've said we a lot in that answer. So how did you give your team, and your team, I'm meaning the entire Whole Foods Market company, how did you help them know what to say to the growers, and really do that interaction and that collaboration? What are the things that they're doing that are helping? How did you train them to do this?
So I think, again, our quality standards team is such a unique team. It's around 20 subject matter experts, everything from animal welfare to seafood to agricultural practices, right? So the credit goes to this team largely for creating this policy. They're the policy experts. What's really cool about this work, though, is, again, the theme of interconnectedness. And so we want to make sure that when we're talking about pollinator health, we're not doing so in a vacuum. We're recognizing it as a key part within larger, resilient climate and nature health, right? And so that's some of the language that we can help surround is connecting the dots between like, hey, how does this one really important policy ladder up to our larger climate and nature strategy? But also what's really cool is that, I joined Whole Foods about 3 years ago, just over 3 years ago. But they didn't need me to work on sustainability, right? I came in to really create a strategy and help drive us forward at the pace that is needed, right? But there's been a Herculean effort of individual team members, incredibly passionate, knowledgeable team members, longtime Whole Foods team members, and longtime farmers and suppliers for us that deeply care and know about this work. So it really wasn't as much as us doing the educating, again, going back to that service mindset, like how can we help support? What metrics or figures are important? Can we help with talking points? Can we help advocate in moments like this on podcasts for this really important policy? So that's really, I think, an important thing to understand is that like this is not the work of one individual or one team, but rather a constellation of efforts that are really being codified by important policy.
So what metrics are important? And can you do you see this as a way of helping these growers also increase production? I mean, like what can you help them talk about or understand?
Yeah, I mean, I think metrics are super important. And I will answer this question more broadly because I think we would do a disservice to climate and nature if we spoke specifically on pollinator. But I think alone, I should say.
Yep.
I think part of the challenge, and I hope that people who hear this are nodding their heads who are doing this work too, is how do we rigorously and consistently measure something as complex as nature? And so when it comes to agriculture in particular, that's really challenging when it comes to biogenic or nature-based solutions. It's also incredibly important. So we really feel strongly about being on the front line of this work. Again, Whole Foods Market is really synonymous with trust and rigor. And with that comes the responsibility to ensure that the work that we're doing around climate and nature is the right work and is measured rigorously. And what I mean by that is that a lot of this work, when it comes to climate, Carbon is a metric that is hyper important. There's no doubt. It's essential that we're understanding our carbon footprint and working to abate that. However, there's also additional metrics, particularly around a term that I've used, ecosystem services. So this is things such as soil health, pollinator health, air quality, water quality, et cetera, that are also important, right? And I think that while GHG protocol is very strong and clear about measure and rigor and accounting for carbon and in non-biogenic solutions, when it comes to nature-based solutions on farm, we're really on the frontier of ensuring rigor there, right? This work we know moves the needle. How much and in what way and what are the key metrics? There really is no one key metric for biodiversity that's universally accepted right now, which makes sense. Biodiversity is such a complex thing. So pollinator health is one metric of biodiversity, is one metric within ecosystem services, which is one metric within climate and nature health, if that tracks. So it's a bit of a nesting egg. This is to say that as an industry, we are getting there. And I'm really, really exceptionally proud and excited by the work we're doing in this space, really the frontier work in this space around meaningful programs, projects, investments in this space that help to reduce our carbon impact, improve biodiversity, soil health, et cetera, and doing so in a way that is rigorous and in alignment with international protocol, hopefully. Like that piece of it is very exciting.
I've been sneakily adding audience questions in here already. I have one more question to ask you before I go to a couple quick fires here.
Sure.
You mentioned before, ag is 1/3, and how does this whole climate smart agricultural strategy really? Your title is sustainability. It's not nature. How does it dovetail, intersect with your emissions reductions goals?
Yeah. Sustainability is such a broad term, so it's not nature. And I think that that's important to note, but you're right, technically speaking. So we have a climate and nature strategy. And as I mentioned, our carbon abatement is one piece of this. I feel really passionately about the fact that we must move away from something that I'm sure you've heard, carbon tunnel vision, meaning focusing solely on carbon abatement. My feeling is very strongly, and research supports this, that the true North Star isn't carbon abatement. The true North Star is climate and nature health and resiliency, right? So carbon abatement is one of the key changes needed, one of the key levers to achieve that. But we ought not get such tunnel vision that we focus solely on an input versus the output. And what I mean by that is, yes, we, again, must abate carbon. I want to be super clear on that. We need to measure and know, but it's not our only responsibility. We also must measure and improve the impact we're having on ecosystem services. There is no realm more capable of that than agriculture, which touches all of those things directly, right? There's so many different sectors where you have to go really far up or downstream to understand that impact. Agriculture, it's all right there on the land as you're growing it. And so for me, if you can't tell, I get super excited about and passionate about ensuring that we are focused on the true North Star and making strategic decisions according to that, right? So not letting carbon alone be the sole decider of our climate and nature work. We must also consider these other things. And, I get really frustrated and disturbed by this concept of like spreadsheeting our way out of the climate crisis. Like, we're not going to do that. That's not how this works. And yes, it's essential that we abate carbon, but we ought not be so individually hyper fixated on carbon or greenhouse gas emission abatement alone, that we're missing the true North Star around climate and nature health and resiliency.
We're winding down on our time, which really bums me out. But I have two more questions for you. One is, you're owned by a very large company that
Yeah.
begins with the letter A, Amazon. And I'm curious how you collaborate with that, with the company. How does Whole Foods collaborate with its parent company on these issues? Like, are you doing it alone? How do you share?
Yeah, we collaborate often and regularly. So our strategy is built in alignment with Amazon's sustainability strategy. They have a team, Worldwide Sustainability, um, that creates the policy and structure and requirements of a sustainability program. That includes the subsidiaries, of which we are. And we also partner with our counterparts at Amazon Fresh within the Worldwide Grocery subdivision. And so Amazon is super engaged in this world. And a large part of my role is working with them to ensure that our strategy is, in alignment with their goals. But also, Amazon is a two-way door on this, right? So Whole Foods Market represents really, like, it's their crown jewel of agriculture within their business, if you think about it, right? So Whole Foods Market represents really a unique opportunity to enhance the climate and nature health through agriculture within Amazon business units. So as such, we're really seen as the experts, and we help guide and create policy in partnership with Amazon on this space, which is really cool. So when you think about scale and the opportunity to move the needle and drive change, there is no doubt that Amazon has a massive, massive role in that. And so what's really cool is to work with them to create policy and to create changes together that move the needle in the right way. Also really cool is they have the Climate Pledge Fund, which is really exciting state-of-the-art frontier work of investment around climate solutions. And what's so cool is, and rightfully so, they're investing in some agricultural solutions. And so we get to work very closely with the Climate Pledge Fund in a true win-win-win situation. It's a win for Amazon that they get to invest in hopefully very successful businesses. It's a win for us that we get to partner on some of these mitigation and solutions that they bring forward. So it helps drop our carbon. But also it's a win for our farmers and suppliers on these solutions because they get them at a discounted rate and sometimes often get to pilot them for free, which is pretty cool. So to me, that's a really great example of how we can win together in partnership with Amazon.
Caitlin, what's one thing you think young people beginning a career in sustainability are missing right now? This is a great audience question.
I think a deep understanding of the art of sustainability change. So I'm very, very fortunate to get to guest lecture. I'm also currently getting my PhD, so I'm in the academic world in this space. And I know that so much of what is taught is the what, or the science, but equally as important is the how. And when looking for a career in corporate sustainability, you have to be an excellent practitioner of both. You have to deeply understand the science, and you have to equally be as successful in the art. So how we get those things done is really where you will be able to set yourself apart as a practitioner. The reality is that most people, certainly people graduating with a degree, would be able to put together a pretty material strategy around sustainability. It's really not, that is important. But equally as important is, again, how you get that strategy embedded and aligned within the company's strategy and really codified within the business, right? So that to me would be one thing. Focus on the science and the art, understand how to be an incredible change agent. Learn to be in service of your stakeholders, and really, really deeply understand that, you know, you are not the hero of the story. We are all like, how you get this done sometimes involves breadcrumbing years out. It really is the short and the long game all at once. So that complex, interconnected thinking, if that excites you, lean into that. This is a cool career.
Thank you. Thank you so much for those inspiring words. I really appreciate it. That I'm like, ooh, I wish I knew that when I started. But
Me too.
Thanks, Caitlin, for joining
Thanks,
us. I
Heather.
really appreciate it. Thanks also for those of you eavesdropping either live or later when you watch this as a recording. And I want to just plug the next interview, which is coming up on October 16th with the Chief Sustainability Officer of Volvo Group, which, by the way, just helped Amazon put a whole bunch of electric trucks into Southern California. So I'll be speaking with Karen Svensson on October 16th. So make sure you look for that registration. Thanks so much, Caitlin. Take care.
Heather,
I hope you feel
such a
better.
treat. Thank you so much.